Hey Trae, how you doing? So good to see you.
Good to see you too, always. And I gotta say, I every time I see you, I'm like, how do you do it? Because keeping your ear to the ground with all of the changes that are happening in our city, I know it cannot be easy. For those who may not know what Vanishing Seattle is, just give us a brief overview about Vanishing Seattle.
Yeah, well, Vanishing Seattle is a project that I started in 2016 that basically documents and celebrates the spaces in Seattle that are disappearing, that have been displaced and priced out, the places that are the soul of the city. And it is a lot. The city's been changing quite quickly, but I do have a lot of help from my followers and supporters who send me what they're seeing in their neighborhoods, send me pictures and stories and memories. So I have a lot of support there.
Well, we just appreciate all the work happening at Vanishing Seattle because I'll say, as a Seattleite, it's important to me. I mean, you look up and you're like, wait a minute. All of these things have closed down, and some of them I didn't even know. Like literally, because of you, I got to celebrate one of my birthdays at Blue 99, at right there on the waterfront, right? Because you were like,
yeah.
it's about to
we
close.
Were there together.
Yeah, we were
Highway
there.
99 Blues Club.
At
Yeah,
Highway 99 Blues Club, and I was like, what? I didn't even know about this place. I got to go there before they close. Like it wasn't even because I had history with it. It was because I knew how much of a historical marker it was for the city, and it being right there at the waterfront. And oh my God, did we have such an amazing time with the blues acts there. But you're here to also share with us some new news. Tell us about some of the things going on. You got a whole list, and so we want to get into it. I know we have some photos, but I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Well, yeah, I've got some spots to share with viewers around places that have vanished recently, but I think it's also important to highlight places that are not vanishing, that are still around to support. And then there's also some, kind of success stories about places that have come back, from vanishing and are now unvanished. And those are some of my favorite spots to highlight. And I will say quickly, just talking about Highway 99 Blues Club, they've kind of reopened in a new form as the Belltown Yacht Club in Belltown, in the back of Screwdriver. So folks should definitely check that out. We should go party down there sometime.
There we go. There we go. Thank you for mentioning that, because now we got another place to go try out. Well, I see, what is it? Hales
Ales.
Hales Ales.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay.
There it is. Yeah, so Hales Ales, this was a tap room and brewery that was in between the Ballard and Fremont area. They'd been open for 40 years and just closed in April. And I think they were like the third oldest and longest running brewery in the Pacific Northwest, real trailblazer and innovator in terms of independent craft brewing. And they also had this amazing warehouse and performance space on the back of it called Hales Palladium that was host to a lot of music and festivals. They closed out their existence with the Moisture Festival, which was a good way to go out, but definitely, a community hub and space had been around for a long time. People met their spouses, best friends, celebrated weddings. So yeah, a big part of the community. I think, the past few years had been tough on them, and with the pandemic, of course, and the founder, Mike Hale, retired. So yeah, that was a place that a lot of folks were sad to see go.
Well, I mean, just looking at the photos of the Palladium, I was like, oh man, you already know there was probably some amazing showcases there. And, T-Dub, art queen here at Converge, talked about the Moisture Festival. And I didn't realize that it was them kind of celebrating this 40-year existence here in the city as one of those staples of not just brewing, but also, as you say, this kind of, space to showcase amazing talent and to bring people together. For me, there's something to be said about the history of spaces, and new spaces can try to come in and replicate it, but it's just never the same, particularly for those of us who have really experienced the energy and the unique characteristics of the space before it. So that's a sad one to see it go. You're talking about 40 years. That's a lot of history.
Yeah. And it's I believe that places do absorb and hold energy that it can be hard to replicate, and replicate the energy and the communities that come together in those spaces. But we'll get into this a bit later, but I think if that same intention and sense of community can come through in new spaces, I think that's definitely a win. And, people who are affected or impacted by being in a space like the Palladium, hopefully they carry that with them and then maybe, create something new. So
Yeah. I mean, that to me is how it happens, right? Where you have patrons of a space that then are like, you know what, I got the resources, I'm going to do something because that space was so important to me. That's how you carry it forward, I feel like, because you have to be there to experience it. Newer developers coming into a community just don't get that often, right? And I think that there has to be some really strong intentionality of newer developers to really connect with the communities that they're coming into in order to even attempt it. We see new spaces like, what's happening at Midtown Center. We saw it with Liberty Bank Building there, but that's intentionally connecting with community organizations to ensure that history is there and it's alive and well. I mean, just going through the kind of park yard, basically that little yard that they have at the Midtown Center now. I was like, okay, there's some things here. Obviously the artwork on the outside, we got D. Charlene, we got a lot, Dr. Mims is on their building. We got a lot of iconic, Black community members that are part of the artwork there. And so now it's just about really how the residents relate to this history that they're going to be living around, right? So that's really important. Next up, I see the Paragon Seattle.
Yeah, so the Paragon, this was a Queen Anne neighborhood staple for, I think, 28 years. And it was a spot where a lot of local musicians first got their start. Like Brandy Carlisle used to perform there, I think in like the early 2000s. When I was there, Jaden Grayson was performing, and someone from King Youngblood. I have friends that, perform there. So they had, free live music. They also had drag bingo. It was just a community gathering spot. And just a pretty iconic place in Queen Anne. And I think they had to close because their landlord didn't renew the lease, which is something that, we see over and over again. Supposedly, the landlord wanted to give the lease to a chain restaurant instead. So, I mean, we'll see what comes through. But it definitely was a place that you could feel like the sense of, community and just access to great live music and just like amazing dedicated staff. So they'll be missed for sure.
Well, once again, you're talking about spaces where musicians are able to get their start. We know Seattle has a unique musical history. I'm loving that now. Museums are picking up on a lot of that. I got to see some of that kind of interwoven through Seattle's history at Mohi. And we just had Washington State Historical Society on the other day talking about how they do that at the Tacoma History Museum. The idea of our history being embedded in places is real. How do we pick it up afterwards, particularly when you have spaces where unique music is born, where fandom can start, right? Like the beginning of people recognizing the musical genius of another Seattleite and just bonding over that. That to me is again, how do you replace spaces like that? I think that's why when I get really excited when I see newer projects from people that do understand that are like, no, we're intentional. Like this is going to be that kind of space. Geez, Cindy, bro, I'm telling you that's a tough one. You also got the Give In, right?
Yeah. So the Give In, they just celebrated their 1-year anniversary in April. This is a not-vanishing space. So it's a space for cabaret and burlesque, and it's run by and produced for cabaret and BIPOC and queer performers. They're in a historic space in Ballard in the Crest building, which I think was built in the 1920s. And that was a grocery store that operated for about 100 years from the late 1800s up through the 80s. And that Crest building has been home to a variety of cool businesses and theater groups. Bop Street Records was there up until a couple years ago. So they basically wanted to, have like a cooperatively run space where they could produce their own shows. And they started doing that during the pandemic, which was a real gamble, but it paid off. And so, you can definitely support them. They've got several shows coming up in May. They also have classes and workshops, and they have a community space as well. So just, really awesome to see them succeed. during this time. Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, you're giving me T-Dub vibes over here because you are explaining spaces that we get to embark on that really are showcasing the wide breadth of artistry that we have throughout this city. And, burlesque is one of those things that is just an age old practice, but it's so entertaining, right? And the idea that these guys were able to come together in this historic iconic space, now that's something we could truly celebrate. And a year of celebrating a year anniversary through a pandemic is a huge feat. I think it also showcases their connectivity to community because people still showed up and participated and supported what they were doing, which I think is what allows them to even celebrate a year anniversary. So I appreciate you. Now I got another reason to go to Ballard.
Yeah. Yeah, one of many.
Yeah, there we go. There's a lot of Ballard has its own feel, and I know through our work together talking about some of that history in Ballard in one of the short films that we did with Vanishing Seattle. I wasn't born around Ballard, so when I go there, it's intentional, and almost often I'm going to Market Street Shoes when I'm in Ballard. But I will say, every time I go, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a place to just explore, walk around, see some of the dope restaurants, some of the dope spaces. There's a lot, it feels like to me, mom and pop shops out there, owned by local residents. And you gotta love that. I don't walk around there and see a bunch of chain restaurants. And I appreciate that, especially out in Federal Way, where there's just like, it just mimics every like suburb across America. There's definitely an Olive Garden, and
which I mean that's fun too.
So up next here, one of my faves, man. Tell us about Sneaker City.
Yeah, well, speaking of shoes, so Sneaker City, this was, definitely a downtown institution, the oldest mom and pop sneaker shop in Seattle. I think it was founded in like the early 90s in 92 or something. And they were located between that Starbucks and that Hard Rock Cafe that was across from Pike Place Market. So definitely attracted sneakerheads from like all over the city, the country even. They carried classics like Converse, but also like customs and limited editions and, different colors and stuff you couldn't find anywhere else. So they basically, had to close because they were priced out. Apparently their landlord wanted like $5,000 more a month in rent.
Wow.
And I think they were hoping to find another place downtown, but it was just too challenging to find a space that was affordable. So I think they closed in February or something like that, and they started selling off their inventory online. So you can still, I think, get some of their shoes and their kicks online. So, but yeah, definitely one that a lot of Seattle folks grew up with. And Sneaker City is going to be missed for sure.
It's a tough one, to be honest. I mean, my goodness, just talking to Kyle Jaquay here yesterday about, he and his brother being sneakerheads, and Sneaker City was one of those spots. We didn't even get into it, but I already know, because when you're looking for like unique shoes, that was the place to go. And I grew up with two sneakerheads. My two brothers still to this day are like that. I just saw a new box of shoes my brother just got. And my other brother was, loving shoes so much that he was like, look, I'm going to start reselling shoes. The idea is that, and then my cousin customizes shoes. So I'm talking about a family of sneakerheads. And Sneaker City was just iconic in that way. The idea that I think we didn't even realize when we were younger that this was like a unique place, right? I almost thought it was a chain because it was that popular, right? So I was like, maybe this is just the downtown location. But I didn't realize that that was a mom and pop operation. And I think sometimes that's really lost on us. I'm glad that were able to merge to online, but there's nothing like going in that store and being able to try those shoes on, test out different shoes, see how the unique nature of different colors and schemes and themes in shoes was going to fit with certain outfits that you had in mind. That was like a whole thing, Cindy.
Yeah, it's a very visceral experience. And I mean, they predated Nike Town. I mean, it's hard for me to think of, there's not that many places left that aren't chains. And yeah, that experience of going and interacting with other customers and with the staff and with their shop dog, Chewy, so it's just, yeah, online doesn't really compare. And I thought, my understanding is that after they do sell off their inventory online, they're just kind of, I think they're done. But I don't know. I always have hope that places are going to resurface again sometimes. But yeah, online is definitely not the same as the in-person experience.
Well, before we get into the next one, I think my major question is, as a consumer, we can only do so much, because it's like, what do we do? Do we flood them with, orders, trying to share what they have going on, as a customer and as a patron of their business? But there's also something to be said about how these landlords can get away with something so atrocious. $5,000 more per month as an ask and a request. It seems as though there's a lot of tactics that are happening on that end in terms of real estate that are intentionally pushing businesses out. As you do a lot of this research and understand why businesses and institutions are vanishing, is that one of those themes that you're seeing across multiple properties?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely see patterns and themes pop up, and rent increases, rent hikes are definitely a big one that prices small businesses out. So yeah, I mean, I think there's multiple ways that people can support, just like where they choose to spend their money. But there's also like forces coming down that are kind of beyond our control, and it can be very frustrating because it's like, what are the interventions? How can these commercial spaces and these small businesses stay in place when it's just a matter of like money and profit, it seems like. So I don't know. I think some of it is like on the policy level. I think there are some cases too, though, where like the public can, put some pressure and attention when they see something that they feel isn't right. Like with the case of Scandinavian Specialties in Ballard, when they learned that that's like the last remaining Scandinavian focused retail shop. I think when folks found out that the landowner there was planning on redeveloping the site and that the business would get displaced, I think folks like contacted the landlord and convinced him to give them some more time. So I think there are things that can be done, but sometimes it's hard to know what the intervention is, especially when a lot of it is not very transparent or public either. So yeah.
This is why I think a lot of people just truly appreciate Vanishing Seattle. I mean, I for me, I'm always like solution oriented, right? And so immediately I'm like, oh yeah, how do we drum up the support to like, almost like shame this person for how dare you ask for 5,000 more, right? Like there's something to be said. We've seen spaces be saved because of that, right? Because the community has come together and unifying their collective voice to say, look, no, you're not going to do this here, right? But it's also sometimes what's necessary to not only encourage, but also educate some of these real estate developers and owners of these commercial spaces or apartment buildings, residential spaces that have such a long, strong history in their communities. And I think without the public being able to be aware, as you said, it's not much of a transparent process. And we don't see a lot of business owners, say, man, I'm going to the community. How dare you, right? We see them try to figure it out on their own. But I just really wonder about, you talking to you right now, I'm like, man, what is the institute that can just like stop some of this stuff or, really work to educate these, developers and property owners to be like, don't just go after profit here in Seattle. We need to be maintaining certain spaces that are really unique to what we have here in the Pacific Northwest, and understanding that they're beloved spaces. I know there was so much work being done in Chinatown ID. I mean, I was there with you. We were talking about multiple spaces, but so much effort to say that just stop, just stop trying that tactic of how you can get more money, and understand that you also get to be a part of an amazing institution that has historical ties. So I just, I'm optimistic in that way. Like, and maybe they would hear that story and be like, so what, boot out, right? But the idea of really being, a collective and community to share, why these spaces are important. I go there.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I also believe in people power, and I know you've seen it happen, and you've been, through your work with King County Equity Now and Africa Town, and just been able to push forward so many, transformative, positive things that I think whether it's pressure on developers or elected officials, or just, getting more people into positions of ownership themselves, and we can kind of redefine like what does it, look like to, live together, and what kind of community do we want to build. So yeah, I mean, that stuff is hard and it takes time, but I, really do think that it starts with us and the choices we make, and thinking outside of this box of like, this is how it has to be, that everything is just always up to the highest bidder. Yeah, that, people can do better, and we can, make that change together as a collective.
Yeah, and I'm just a firm believer in it. You're right. I've been able to see it happen and take shape, and be a part of that. But I really am a firm believer that it's a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not just pressing, the owner, but it's also, like you said, really building new policy and legislation that won't allow commercial owners to ask for something so egregious, right? Like, you don't get to hike up the rent like that. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be regulating the ways that you ask. I feel like it's kind of a free market. It's almost like the wild, wild west. Like,
Yeah.
they get to, they get to ask for what they think they can get, instead of it being super regulated. And this is what we're doing here to maintain spaces, particularly in commercial properties that really are, become institutions of the community. I could go on and on in this with you, but just thank you for indulging me for a minute there. The next one you have up is Yen War.
Yeah, Yen War Village in West Seattle. I gotta represent the shirt. Yeah, Yen War Village in the Pagoda Room, definitely a West Seattle institution, classic Chinese American restaurant and lounge. So they are, sticking around. They're not vanishing, but they're definitely in need of support. Yeah, it was. So the restaurant itself goes back. It's been Yen War since I think like the mid '60s. And it's now owned by the Wong family, Wendy and Gary Wong. And Gary started as a dishwasher and moved up to head chef, and then became the owner in the '80s. And yeah, just a karaoke spot, like a really fun, diverse cross section of people that come together there to have fun. They have bingo and trivia and live music. And during the pandemic, unfortunately, Wendy and Gary had some really serious medical setbacks and were unable to run the restaurant. So their sons, Larry and Isaac, stepped in and have been doing some, really great, updates to the space, putting some pool tables, expanding the space to allow for more live music and events. And their food is amazing. They hand make all their pot stickers. Their fried almond chicken is legendary. Everything's made fresh to order. It's just such a such like a classic, like wonderful like old Seattle dive. So yeah, definitely they could use your support. They've also got a benefit show coming up on Tuesday on the 17th with Brett Amaker and the rodeo playing. So check that out. But yeah, Yen War is one of these spots that we definitely cannot let vanish.
Oh, yes. You know what? I'm just like listening to you and I'm like, ooh, another place for me to go try. And especially when you're talking about some really good Chinese food, I'm going to tell you, there is nothing like our Asian infusions here in the Pacific Northwest, particularly in Seattle. We have some of the best Chinese food ever. And when I go other places, I'm just like, this is not right. This is not right. Like whether it's Vietnamese, Japanese, Chinese, I enjoy all of it. You know what I mean? Thai food. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm a real fan of it. And so I feel like I'm a bit of a connoisseur. And I was like, man, am I kind of a snob? Because when I go to other states, I'm like, oh, let me try this fried rice. And I'm like, what are you putting in this fried rice? Like, so you're giving me another space to try. I so appreciate you for bringing all this to our attention.
Yeah, and it's Asian American Heritage Month too. So we've got so many amazing, local businesses to choose from and to go support this month. And especially, API hate, anti-Asian hate is still a thing, unfortunately. So businesses that suffer from that too. So definitely could, use your support in that, and during this time.
And you know what? Have a good time and get some good food. You know what I mean? It's for me, it's not even only about the support. It's about being able to recognize great restaurants, great spaces, right? So it's a both and I love that you put that out there, because you are right in terms of, us just representing. That is where the solidarity comes in. That's where I think that community love comes in, and the fact that this space has that eclectic audience already, in terms of who patrons there, all the customers coming together. I'm looking forward to going there, seeing the new pool tables. I might have to take
a lot of stuff to do together.
Yeah, I know.
Our social calendar's full.
You're gonna have to remind me too. Hey, Trae, I'm gonna be here tonight, and then I'll just have to come out with you. We'll have to make a date of it. I'm so for it. But also, you got Cafe Racer right on the list.
Yeah. So just to kind of close things out on a hopeful, positive note. So Cafe Racer is a place that recently unvanished. They've got a very long history, starting out on Roosevelt in the U District. They're open in 2004, and are really a gathering place for, like experimental outsider art and music, like vaudeville, carnival, poetry, dance, comics, like you name it. Like really drew a lot of folks and characters from all walks of life, whether you were like a punk or a college student or an old hippie, like that was a spot. And they, in I think it was 2012, they suffered a really tragic shooting where there were several regulars and staff that were killed or injured, and they decided to bounce back from that. Organized a big concert around against gun violence. Even though they received hate mail for that, they continued to persevere. And then in 2017, they were facing closure just from rising costs, and there was a lot of city construction going on Roosevelt. And then they reopened in 2018 under some longtime customers that wanted to keep it going. And then during the pandemic, they had to close, and apparently the landlord wanted full rent during the time, so they just decided to close and try to figure out their next steps. And they pivoted to caferacerradio.com, which is still live and is 24/7, all focused on local music across all genres. And then in September of last year, they were able to open in a new spot, which is the old Barca Lounge, for folks to remember, on 11th Ave and Capitol Hill. So they're right next to Vermilion and kind of continuing to hold down that art scene on 11th Ave. And beautiful space, continuing to have a focus on live artists and local music. So definitely, encourage folks to check out Cafe Racer. And it's some good news for once.
Some good news. We have to have some Feel Good Friday goodness.
Feel Good Friday,
right?
there you go.
I really appreciate all that you bring to Converge and Vanishing Seattle. You care about the city, and it's just clear that you do. As a Seattleite yourself, you understand and appreciate our eclectic nature here, and I just love it, because these guys know I use the word eclectic for them all the time for my Weird at Night team over there, but it's so real and it's so true. I see why we have a lot of musicians who come from across the country to come to Seattle to make their start, because we really do have this amazing artist community that is full of commercial spaces, event venues, amazing restaurants opening themselves to artists, a real artist community here. And even listening to you talk about it from like a kind of a property perspective, and like these institutions or restaurants and different spaces, I'm hearing all of the brilliance that is brewing in these places. And it's just amazing to be your friend, to know you, and to know that you're doing all this great work. But before I let you go, you guys were also just invited to be a part of a film festival, and I had to have you talk a little bit about that before your outro.
Yeah, thanks, Trae. So on the 15th, Sunday, I'm like, what time is it? Yeah. What day is it? Where are we? But at the Grand Illusion, there's going to be, let me just double check here. Yeah, May 15th at 4:00 at the Grand Illusion in the U District. There's a film festival that both of us are going to be a part of, Vanishing Seattle and Converge. We're going to be showing the Vanishing Seattle film about Hardwick's Hardware, and then also a film that Converge and Vanishing Seattle produced together that's about Scarecrow Video. So wanted to kind of showcase some of the, just longstanding businesses and communities and scenes in the U District. And it's free. So yeah, folks should definitely check that out.
Thank you so much, Miss Cynthia
Thank you,
Brothers.
Trae.
I so appreciate you for being
Likewise.
on and bringing us some feel good news. I mean, some of it we got to understand, places are vanishing, but I love that we ended on such a great note. Thank you for all the effort that you're bringing to Vanishing Seattle and for really being such a beacon in terms of that collective understanding for all of us to know what is happening when it comes to all of these crazy changes in our city. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Trae. I just so appreciate you as a friend and like a partner in these efforts. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And we definitely got a lot of places to check out in the next few weeks. So
a lot of fun to have.
Yes. For sure.
Well, thank you.